So really quickly, we're able to tell in this one. So the first we talked about, the first one was that voluntary response, and the second one was a convenience sample. And then I said the voluntary response was biased because the people were able to choose whether they responded or not. So typically, the only types of people that we get in those, like we said, are those with extremely strong opinions. And then in the convenience sample, the only type of people that we would get in this were the ones that are close to us, whatever's convenient for us. So a simple random sample is going to make it where it's not biased. So I'm going to show you an example of this. So there is a website, and I'll show you some polls here in just a second, but there's a website called that tries to eliminate bias in surveys and polling. And since we're close to the election, then there's a lot of polls there. So it's called 538.com. Anybody ever heard of it? Anybody know what it stands for? Nobody knows what 538 might be? Think about the election. Your history classes would be upset if you didn't know. You get it now? So we're going to learn something new today? Giselle, you don't know? 538? Oh. How many electoral votes in the Electoral College? You know how each state gets so many electoral votes? How many throughout the country are there? 538. So there's your website, 538. Okay? So you should. I know they taught you that. That was in your sentence. All right. So, anyways, in general, so what they do, they go through. They tell you who's favored to win, but then they give you all the ways that the other candidate can win. Okay. But what I wanted to show you is, and this is updated all the time. This was just updated 41 minutes ago. So basically, if you look at this, there are about, if you look at all the different ways that they've done polls and mapped it out, there's 12, 16, 17 ways that Biden could win, and there's about 5 that Trump can win right now, just based on their polling. What 538 does is it takes polls from all over and merges them together to decide who could win. Now, if you want to look into some of that, it shows you a nice little picture there of all the ways that he could win and all the ways that Trump could win. So it still tells you that when they simulate the election based on their results, that Trump would win 22 times out of 100, Biden wins 77 times out of 100. And then some of you say, well, where's that other time? That's a tie, which would only happen 1 out of 100 times. And that would be a crazy scenario. Okay, so, but again, it says in here, don't count the underdog out. So like in the 2016 one, on here, I think Trump had 36 out of 100 chance, and then Biden's was 64 out of 100 chance to win. So in this one, so if you go down though in these, it gives you the outcomes of the situations. You see, it's kind of almost like our normal curves, but a little bit differently. And then it shows you what states will decide it. And if you notice, North Carolina's in there, right? They're in the close way to decide who would win. See, right now they're only 0.8% away in North Carolina. Florida's in there, Arizona's in there, Pennsylvania's in there, Wisconsin, some of these states. So then there's some states, obviously, that aren't going to decide it. Like in Wyoming, it's already pretty much over. And if you go down in Hawaii, it's already pretty much over. In Massachusetts and something. But there's a few in the middle that will decide it.
Wait,
now,
was that the very top
That is Nebraska's 3rd district. They get 1 electoral vote.
3rd district.
Mm-hmm. It's a state that has different districts in there. You have to go through that. Nebraska statewide gets 2 electoral votes, but then they also have a 3rd district that gets 1 electoral vote. Very strange. But see, Maine and Nebraska, it says, have congressional districts which are shown separately because those states split their electoral college votes, allotting some to the statewide winner and some to the winner of each district. They're rare. Not many states do that. Now, so it shows how the forecast has changed all the way through June and then to now. And then it also shows you some weird and not so weird possibilities. And their probabilities of happening. Now, there were polls, so let me see if I can get to the polls. There you go. So then there are polls, and they rate the polls based on, so what we were just talking about, like if they're biased or not. How do they collect their sample? They give them a rating. So some polls have a lower rating because of the way they collect their sample. So there were some polls on there that had a rating of like an F, and we went and looked through why is their rating so low. Well, that was because they wouldn't call cell phones. So the only phones they called was landline phones, and a lot of people don't have those, so they're not getting a good sample there. And then some of the polls were rated low because they were ran by a certain party. Like the Democrats didn't actually run the poll, but their group that supported the Democrats ran the poll. So typically they may be biased in the way they asked the question, or the Republicans ran the poll, a group that supported the Republicans were asking the question. So they may have picked and chose like where they went to, right? So the ones that were like really good, like A plus, would be the ones that like this, ones that are actually going around to different places and they know that they're doing it unbiasedly. So they're doing cell phones, they're doing home phones, they might be going in person, they're doing all kinds of different things. And you can see how close all of these typically are. So those are pretty close as you go through them. And the different polls, so if you look at these, I showed you there were polls down here. Different polls have different names, like we talked about. And you can see A's, B's, C's, and others. So to be an A plus poll, let's say Monmouth University has an A plus poll, and it basically talks through, it shows you all the data, it tells you how they collected their data, it tells you who they feel like is in the lead, it tells you how they did previously, it gives you their question, so it tells you exactly what question they asked. If the election for president was today, would you vote for? And then that was the question they asked. And then they also ask, are you certain about your vote choice, or might you change your mind before election day? And notice it says they rotated the questions. So even in this poll, they rotated which one they would ask. So they may say, if the election for president was today, would you vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden? But see, they're saying Trump first. So then the next person they ask, they would say, if the election were today, would you vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump? That way they make sure that they don't say one name first every time, because that might make people pick the first name. Who knows? So they make sure they rotate it. They show you all this data. So this is statistics. Person making this poll got paid very good, right? But the statistics is not like just giving them the numbers. They have to explain. This is the explanation of what they did. This is one poll, right? And look at how many pages. Yeah, look at 20. So there is a 27-page printout from Monmouth University about this poll, right? So when somebody makes a poll, they don't just put it on the news and say 47% to 45%. They've got data. Now, all these data printouts are coming from computer, right? But somebody had to go in with every question and figure this out. And look, they've separated it by what party do you identify with? What age category are you in? 18 to 49, 50 to 64, over the 65. What's your income level, right? race, education, all kinds of different things. So you can see who's winning, and it's all kinds of categories. So they really go in depth on these things. And then, if you're a candidate, you use that information to your advantage, right? So you're going to take the information that you see here, and you're going to then go through and hopefully use it for your advantage. So somewhere like right here, it says, is your general impression of Joe Biden very favorable or whatever? So you can see it's very unfavorable in our white non-Hispanic group right here. It's very favorable in our Hispanic, Black, Asian, other group. In the education, you can see it's very unfavorable in some and it's very favorable in some. So it's very interesting to look at. And then you can go to like Donald Trump, the same thing. You can see it's very favorable here, but it's also very unfavorable. So you see that people have very strong opinions on him. You can see, right? So he would learn from that either there's a 40% that said very favorable, then there's 33% that said very unfavorable, right? So there's not many in the middle on the somewhats. So that would mean that people have kind of already picked their position on that stance. And there's a lot of other things. Then they talk about the governor and you go through a whole bunch of different possibilities there too. So, very interesting stuff. It does tell you their margin of error. So it tells you like the percentage that they could be off by in all of these things. Because all polls have a margin of error, and we'll learn that as we go through later. But these are things that are going to come up. This is all part of collecting data. So when you're collecting data, you're if you're doing one of those, you're getting paid to do it, which is great. But when you're collecting data, your goal is, can I make the best, the best poll or the best results, making it unbiased. And you're always going to have people checking to see if you're biased or not. So there's people checking behind you, like to check, is that biased or not? If it's biased, then so if I'm on line 120 and I've assigned these players 0 through 9, then at 3:15 I start at the beginning of line 20. Who's going to run at 3:15? Matt and Mark. Yeah, 3 and 5. So these two. Right? So Matt and Mark are going to run at 3:15. So now at 3:30, I'm going to have the next two numbers. That's going to be Brian and Jimmy are going to run at 3:30. So I've got Matt and Mark running at 3:15. I've got Brian and Jimmy running at 3:30. That's the 4-7. Now, at 3:45, I've got 6-5. That would be Pat and Mark. And you say, well, Mark's already ran at 3:15. That's fine. You can run again. It said you can repeat, just not the same time. Then, at 4, I've got my next two numbers. He's going to have to run again. Mark and Gary. Then at 4:15, I've got my next two numbers, 7 and 2, which are Jimmy and Dave. At 4:30, I've got my next two numbers, 3 and 9. That's Matt and Gary. Then I've got my, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 now. At 4:45, I've got my next two numbers, 4 and 2. That would be Brian and Dave. And then lastly, I've got my numbers 1 and 6. That would be Ron and Pat. So I have randomly selected my 8 pairs of sprinters to run using line 120. Now, I was lucky I could only do 1-digit numbers because there were 10 people or less. Typically, we're going to have more than 10, and everybody's going to have to be a 2-digit number. We're going to have to go 2 digits at a time. And I'm going to show you an example of that here in just a minute. But that is how they selected they're pairs of sprinters in this problem. So I'm going to let that run through. That was the process. And if you notice, that's what we had there.
He just went on further.
Yes, he did. Now, so 1 and 6 was the last one, and that's where we ended up at. And yes, you could kept going to 5 and 8, 5 and 0, 0 and 4, 2 and 6, 3, 5, 4, 3, and so on. Okay, so again, those are going to, that's going to be how you assign them. Now I'm going to show you one with 2-digit numbers in the textbook here in just a second, and then we can kind of move forward with this and be able to do the assigning using the random digit. So question number 11 says, do you trust the internet? And it says, you want to ask a sample of high school students the question, how much do you trust information about health that you find on the internet? Do you trust it a great deal, somewhat, not much, or not at all? You try this and other questions on a pilot group of 5 students chosen from your class. Explain how you would use a line on table D to choose a simple random sample of 5 students from the following list. So now we look down at this list of students. They're in alphabetical order. How many students do we have in this list? Here are. So step 1, we're going to label the students. What numbers are they going to get? Yeah, 2 digits. So we'll label them 0, 1 to 40. And I would do that in alphabetical order, right? So again, if I'm labeling those students in alphabetical order, then you should just kind of see student 0, 1 is Anderson, 11 is Drayson, 21 is Kim, 31 is Ryder. So I'm going to go down in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go all the way down the first column, that's 01 through 10. Second column is 11 through 20. Third column is 21 through 30. Fourth column is 31 through 40. Okay? And then, after I label the students 01 to 40 in alphabetical order, I'm going to choose 5, right? So choose 5 with no repeats. So if I want to survey 5 different students, I can't have a number repeat itself, because then I'll be surveying the same student again. So you got to understand, in this case, we don't want any repeats to happen. So now in B, it's going to ask us to actually go through. So we're going to turn, you'll be able to keep your place there, but you can turn to line 107, which is all the way in the back. Is where table D is of your textbook. All the way in the back. It's called table D. I'm going to put one on Canvas as well, so that you'll have. But on line 107, we have certain numbers, and I'm going to write them down just so you see them. So 82739 is the first 5. 57890. Make sure I stay on the right line. 20807. I'm going to stop right there for right now until I need more. So those are the numbers on line 107. Okay, I didn't go all the way across. I just stopped right there. Now, I'm going 2 digits at a time. So I want to go 2 digits at a time because I have my students labeled from 01 to 40. So the first two digits that I get, so you got to be careful here. The first two digits I get are 82. Is there a student labeled 82? Huh? No. Is there a student labeled 73? No. 95? No. 78? No. 90? No. 20?
Yes.
Okay, so we circle that. So 20 is going to be, we need to go back, what student was labeled 20 if we're going in alphabetical order? Johnson? Okay. Now, we're going to keep going. It said we had to get 5, right? So 80. No. 74. 75. 11. Yes. What was it?
No, Grayson.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry.
D-R-A, what?
S-I-N.
So that's 11. Okay, we're going to keep going. 81, we don't have one. 67, we don't have one. 65, we don't have one. 53, no. 00, no. So I've got to keep writing. Okay? Again, you could be looking at it in your table, but I'm just writing it up here so we can see it. So after 55300, it was 94383. I'll do the next one. And finishing that line is 14893. That goes all the way across line 107. So my next two numbers were 94, which I obviously don't have anybody, but then I do have a 38. So who's 38? Washburn. Okay, there's 3 of them. Then the next two numbers, I do have a 31.
Or Ryder.
How do you spell that?
Like,
I
with an R.
R-I-D-E-R?
Yeah.
Okay. 48, I don't have anybody 48. 93, I don't have anybody 93. Now this is a good question. Some people say, well, what do? I finished line 107. Well, you go to line 108. That's what you do. So we go to line 108, and it starts with 60940 and 72024. So 60940 and 72024. So I'm now on line 108. Again, I started on line 107, but I just keep going until I get the number of people that I need. So 60, no. 94, no. 07, yes. I haven't used 07 before, so who is that? Holloway. Okay, so now I've chosen my 5 students randomly using the random digits table. And the reason they like to use the random digits table is everybody should get the same answer if they start at the same line. So if you do it correctly, put them in alphabetical order, and go from 01 to 40, everybody's going to get the same answer. Okay? So that way we can check your answer and say, did you get these 5? Then that way you know you did it correctly there. And those are the numbers. So again, when you're picking people from the random digits table, you always want to label them. So if you have 10 or less in your population that you're choosing from, then you'll label them with 1-digit numbers, right? If you have more than 10, so from 11 all the way up to 100, you're going to label them with 2-digit numbers. If you have more than 100, you're going to have to label them all with 3-digit numbers. Let's say there were 200 people, we'd have to label them from 001 all the way to 200. So even person that's number 1 has to have 3 digits because person number 200 has 3 digits. So it has to be even. They have to have an equal chance. So again, that's how you figure it out. So 10 or less, you can do with 1 digit. 100 or less, you can do with 2 digits. And 1,000 or less, you can do with 3 digits. You're always going to ignore the digits it doesn't cover. So it covered 01 through 40, but we had to ignore 41 through 99 and 00 if it came up, which it did one time. So we ignore all the others. And in this case, we also would have ignored any repeats. So if we had a repeat, we would not have selected it either because the person had already been chosen. So that's how you're going to do that. And you're going to end up using table D. So today I'm going to give you just a couple like that to go through to add with our sampling problems. And that will be the process for choosing a sample. So as you